Right, this is going to be another episode of the Best Damn League show in the Snake and Banter format era where we have Peter Dun here. And if you don't know, he's actually a bit ill today. Even though I will say, it's like I joked on the last one, your voice doesn't sound that much different, mate. Like, I don't know if, like, maybe you're like a fairy and you just can't be captured with technology or something. It just sounds the same, mate. You just sound fine.
Yeah, no reflection in the mirror, right?
Right. Okay. Well, the irony is that might be something that was a problem with some of the players you worked with, but enough about that video on my channel. Right, obviously our guest for this one is YoungBuck, former coach of, I'll just go with the good teams, like Fnatic, that was a pretty good one, right? G2, absolutely. Championship, also was with XL, but we don't talk about that being too much. How are you doing now, YoungBuck?
I'm doing really good. I'm taking care of the kids these days and just watching from the sidelines.
Yes, this is also a show now for retired coaches who are just dads and then they just grow on the next grade. What they have to realise, guys, is they tried to change the current set of players and it didn't work, so they're just growing them themselves now. They're just incubating the next talents from the age up. That's how we're going to do it, right?
Yep. 16 years we'll have a team with Peter's kid, Max's kid, and mine, and then we're almost good to go.
Exactly.
Yep.
Right.
Two more.
So what we're going to do on this one episode, don't ask why, is even though it always goes like the title of that third movie in the Great Trilogy, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, for some reason Peter wants to do the ugly one first. So we'll just actually go the ugly, the good, and the bad, because whatever. It's all right. It technically doesn't matter. It's just it'll be a weird one-off episode. So let's just do it that way. So let's start, Peter. We start with the guest, but we will do your ugly point first as a way to do the second part, and then we'll be lead into it. So people all seem confused initially, but you'll get the hang of it quickly. So Joey, we always have the guest do the first point. So what is your ugly point? What is ugly at the moment about the LEC?
So first of all, thank you, Peter, because my ugly point is lane swaps, and it actually comes into play with even with my good and bad points. And it's just a bit of a rant, like, please, Riot, remove this thing. It's incredibly bad, I think, for viewers to go through this. I think only, like, as a coach, it's really fun to study teams and, like, look at how other teams are doing it and how you can improve on it, and you really try to theory craft. It's a lot of fun, but if you're a viewer, you don't want to see it. And I think as well, there's, especially in LEC, the level of play of the teams is not depicted accurately because, for example, we'll get into one of my Fnatic points later. Fnatic's weak point is top lane, and every team that could potentially beat them or upset them, their main win condition is top lane. And now you have lane swaps, they can easily avoid it almost every game, or at least like you can gamble a bit on it. So I'd say for the viewers, please remove lane swaps, and I think on behalf of a lot of LEC teams, please also remove the lane swaps.
Okay, bold. Yeah. Are you on the same train, Peter?
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, obviously, if I was working full time, in coaching, I would love lane swaps. This is one of the few areas where, as a coach, you can actually get a noticeable advantage just by prepping your teams in advance. But yeah, I'm now a viewer. Like it's boring. It's so boring. And the problem here, though, I would kind of ask you back, YoungBuck, is what would you do to how would you remove the lane swaps? Because it seems pretty difficult right now, no?
Yeah, I think Riot tried really hard to remove it in the past, and I think you maybe just have to do something where if two people are in the top lane, they get much less XP or even less gold. Something absolutely wild that, is just hard targeted only on that aspect of the game.
Okay. Any more, Peter?
Sure. No, I agree with you. I think that there are... I might also talk a little bit about top laners later on, but definitely because of the threat of lane swaps, like the champion diversity we've seen with top laners, this split has been really, really low. And you compare to mid laners can basically play whatever they want, unless you're Vladdy, who has to pick for the team, or you're Camelu, who doesn't have the largest champion pool at LEC level. Basically mid laners can do whatever they want, but the people who would be creative in top lane aren't able to be creative because I'm sure maybe you can play Vayne or Varus or something, and then enemy team lane swaps on you and they dive you at 2 minutes 30, and yeah, good game, good counter pick, so that means we just see all these Cassante, this Ambessa, Renekton. It's just kind of boring. So I agree. I wish I had a solution. I don't know what the solution is, because they tried to do it by nerfing gold income, but actually then teams realized it was just experience that mattered. So they have to do something with experience. But it's it's a systems issue. It's been more than a decade since I did game design, so I couldn't tell you what the answer is. But yeah, like you said, like Joey said, it's got to be experience. But I don't know how much you have to do.
Yeah, I will say, obviously, that's also the problem. It's like when Riot fixes these things, they don't even actually make it overt, like we're taking this out the game, because one of the weird things Riot's had since the beginning of when they made League of Legends is they used to always publicly say, like, we don't actually enforce the meta of the game, even though, by the way, that's definitely not true. Anytime double jungle existed, take it straight out of the game. Anytime you did that thing where two people push down the tower immediately, take it straight out of the game. Lane swaps themselves in Season 5, like, that was actually when EU was sort of like getting a tactical edge on the world. They took it out the game. So one of the ways they tend to do it is they try to do it indirectly. Like in the past, they've like made one tower stronger, for example. The problem with that is there'll always be creative ways around that if people really use different champions and different lane assignments. So I actually think the XP one's not bad, because here's the problem. If you're Riot, you can just forget whoever said that 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I don't even know if they're on the design team anymore. You can just forget whatever that philosophy was and change your mind. You can just actually say, you know what? Since in the game, the way the map is played in a pro game is the top lane always goes to the top lane. Absolutely, that lane can be the one that doesn't get the XP, like you say. That's actually a totally fine thing to do. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't even know why you'd have to pretend like you're just doing something generally and it fixes the health of the game, because I think you guys have nailed something here, which is, if you were both still coaches, and especially if you weren't on the best team in the LEC, I'm pretty sure you would actually love lane swaps. Like Peter said, it'd give you this angle where, first of all, actually being a coach, by the way, now fucking matters. Because if people don't understand, the reason there was that massive drama, if you remember last year, about the idea that, like, did BDS get leaked, that G2 was going to do that lane swap, is because it's not like, people think it's like, they talk about lane swap like every time we just all know that the lane swap's happening and we just all go to the correct lane. It's like, oh, it's like an even scenario. No, the whole point is, in the level 1, if you fuck up scouting and putting the right wards down, you will actually not only potentially be like behind, but you might actually fuck up your lane assignment. In that scenario, you won't even be able to try and swap against them. And that's actually the part where I know, like, that's where the coaches can go so far. Because think about the most coachable part. It's like the first 5 minutes of the game. It's super hard to tell someone what to do at 25 minutes with a million different variables. So on that one, that's why, though, it's funny. If people don't know, that's why Monty is a massive fan of lane swaps. Because he actually does see this, by the way, as like a real way. I mean, I think you even saw this with G2 at MSI last year. It's actually a way, if you're the best Western team and you sort of nail this angle, you can have a chance sometimes against the Asian team. Because essentially now, like, as you're saying, the obvious lane that it affects is the top lane. Because like, LEC now's got some good players in top lane, but we don't have like Bin, we don't have the monsters, we don't have the ones that just destroy the whole game. And if you can actually lane swap against those guys, you have a chance. That guy's Jax might not be out of control, they might not be on some super carry pick that gets ahead in the game, but you see what happens if the top lane accelerates. So I know what you mean. As a viewer, I don't like them. I just like the, like, sort of, I like them in theory as like the chess game of it all. The problem is it is more sort of, like I say, the minutiae of what coaches like and the little details, and that doesn't really transmit to the viewer. And obviously they're never going to see it in a solo queue game. Like, if someone even attempted it, I don't even think they'd be able to pull it off. Like, it'll just never be part of it. And it is clearly something in Riot's philosophy. You see it with champion win rates. They do want the game to somewhat resemble what you see in solo queue. Just the notion there is like, you still play Rise in solo queue, but it's just Faker playing it or Doinby playing it. But it's not like it's fundamentally totally different and alien to you. So I sort of get what you mean. And I definitely do think the top lane won. Even though in theory this might be worse for EU, spoiler, even though this is the best damn league show for EU, I don't really give a fuck. Like, I actually want people like Bin to just destroy everyone on their Jax when they have it. Like, I'm talking with YoungBuck. Look, if you have Oscaridin and you chose Oscaridin and you that's the player that's going to take you to a World's Finals 7, well, then I want you to show me it when you go against Zika. Well, he's not going to be fucking there now, is he? But you know what I mean? Like, the actual top laners that are the carry, Ale. I want you to have to actually go head to head, and I want to see how does Oscaridin deal with them in actual lane. Obviously, the area where he's had his weaknesses. So, no, I'm with you. I think it's a good point. I mean, I noticed you did. Yeah. Is that why you put it ugly though, YoungBuck? Because it's not purely bad to you. It's just more like, as a viewer, you don't like it.
Yeah, it's ugly for viewers, and I think especially from the angle that, like, we want League of Legends to survive as long as possible.
Right.
And I do think Riot takes a lot of good steps. Usually, like, they make the game way more explosive. They add a lot of new objectives, etc. And it's actually really surprising that this has been going on for so long and they haven't tackled it. Sure. So so that's why it's just ugly to watch, and it's ugly for the league.
I agree. I also, just on the Riot point, like, I've often criticized Riot, but credit where credit is due. They've been willing to experiment and take a bit more risks in this area. And some, like for instance, they want to nerf mid lane roaming, right? So for one split, I think for summer last year, they changed the minion wave speed on the side lanes so that they hit at the same time. Because mid lane used to hit like 7 seconds before side, right? So then they changed the minions walked faster for I think the first 15 minutes of the game. So all the waves would crash at the same time, and then everyone played AD carry mid, and then nobody roamed anymore, and they didn't like it very much. But they were willing to experiment, and they were willing to kind of take these risks that maybe they wouldn't. So I think maybe we'll see, depending on how how the first stand tournament goes, maybe we'll see the EXP nerf. I hope not before. So my problem is, now that they've decided not to nerf it before playoffs, I hope they leave it in place for first stand. But as soon as first stand is done, just nerf it. Experience, for sure.
Why couldn't they just take him Roman out when Frogger used to play? Then he'd just be a 10 out of 10, wouldn't he? That's the dream. Right, okay, okay then, Peter, you've fucking hyped it now. What is your ugly point? What is so glorious? We have to get out at the beginning to build up all the other points. What is it?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm laughing. Just before I start, I'm laughing because obviously Anivia is now a top laner, not a mid laner. So you know, maybe he's a top laner.
Sure, yeah, maybe.
Mr. Frog. Okay. So my ugly point. So I really want to start on this ugly point because I think that the LEC format, in a Fearless. So Fearless is the big thing. So I'm not the biggest fan of Fearless. I think it's a really good thing to have for one split a year, but I think the novelty, it's really, really good right now, but the novelty will wear off over time. But I think it's a good thing. I think shaking things up for the fans is really, really good. However, the entire world is playing Fearless, and LEC first stand starts on the 10th of March. Okay, I don't know when the champions fly out, but I know that the first game is on the 10th of March. We're recording this on the 14th of February. So in less than a month, first stand starts. It's a Fearless format, Fearless international format, and the LEC hasn't played a single, well, I mean, best of one is technically Fearless, but a single like best of 3 or best of 5 in the Fearless format. And we have an international competition in 3.5 weeks. So like, I mean, I'm not sure what this is, like, I'm not sure what it's going to, what this means for our chances to do well internationally. Like, I think that we're going to have our coaches and whoever's doing draft within teams, whether it's leading players or coaches, is going to, they're not going to have any practice in the format. We're not necessarily even selecting, okay, I think it's unlikely, but maybe Rogue and SK were really good Fearless teams.
Okay.
Very, very unlikely, but maybe they were, right?
Sure.
And we'll just never know because we've played it, we've done an entire round robin of best of one with no Fearless at all. I have seen, even in, LTA, which has let's not talk about LTA like the Americans format, but even in those formats, which have only been going on for like 3 game weekends now, you've seen innovations, right? As people have adapted their drafting style to the new format. But in Europe, we've just decided we're just not going to do it. I mean, why? If Fearless is the thing you're going to do, why do it this way around? That's what I don't understand.
Okay, what do you think, YoungBuck?
So I actually also like that they included it in the format, and again, it's just a way of Riot trying to get as much viewership as possible, and I think that is actually a good thing, also as a novelty. And as a coach, you're probably dreaming of something like this, because I feel like this is where a good drafting coach can really shine, because you have to really think off the cuff and find solutions in the moment because of the countless scenarios you can face. I'll agree with Peter. So what I think is not very likely to happen is that suddenly a team is exposed for really bad drafting. What I can see happening though is that other teams that have experience with it have figured out when they're on stage like which arguments are going to come up in the moment, and have been able to discuss it and going to go over it. And it's very likely that some LEC teams are going to go on stage in a second, third, or fourth game, and there's going to be an argument, and they haven't been there before, and they haven't solved it yet, and the coach doesn't trust the player doesn't trust the coach or a teammate, and so it's quite possible that hilarity may ensue there, or like a lot of problems arise within a team.
Okay. I will say on the format point that Peter makes, if people only follow LEC, not only does every other region play at least BO3s, the LPL was playing BO5 the whole time. And it not only does this mean that they've been playing Fearless and we haven't, but then if you actually look at the playoffs of LEC, it only becomes BO5 when you're in the top 4 portion, actually. It's BO3 to start with. So you also, by the way, if you actually were a team that were like, let's say Fnatic is the best team and they're going to be a team that has a chance at the first stand, they won't even played many BO5s by the time they get to the BO5s at the first stand. Like, they could play an LPL team that's played like 10 games, 10 series of it or something crazy like that. And they're doing it against the best teams in the world. Then also, I'll agree with that latter point you made there, YoungBuck. The part that people haven't thought of is this. They're just thinking of the fun ones where, like, the joke, look, Rogue is terrible, so this would never happen. But if Adam had been there, maybe there would be a mad angle in a game 4 where he could pick out one of those bullshit gods champions. The other guy never played with it in this matchup and doesn't have something prepared. And then you just get an edge. It's like, oh, wow, I love this novelty and this gimmick. What they don't know is there's going to be like a game 3 in one of these BO3s that an LEC team plays. And if people don't know, there are wars behind the scene anyway on what you're going to play in the draft. And people, I know coaches hate it when the player like last second changes his fucking pick. And it's like, I was headed towards like 3 things and you've just picked something out of nowhere. So I can't even imagine how many like people are going to blame the draft because they lost, or a teammate because he didn't pick what we thought they'd pick, or even worse, this is an angle I've just thrown out there. If you think it's bad, that thing of maybe BDS got the leak that G2 was going to do that lane swap, the reason why that was never as big a deal, like I was never saying that was like some criminal behaviour, is because you get leaks all the time of what people are playing in scrims. Or, by the way, the best one is if someone's just a dick, like if he doesn't like the other team or he wants like someone on there to lose, then he just leaks something. Yeah, by the way, they're playing this, it's like their secret pick. Imagine if that happens, because if you don't know, guys, in the West, we're also individualistic. Even though they lie in interviews and say, oh, of course I want the other EU team. No, they don't. They want the other EU team to fucking lose and look shit, so that if we're shit, then they're shit too. But it's not that way when it's the other regions, I'm telling you. Like the LCK especially, they are literally going to tell people like stuff that they've seen in the scrim and the game and what the fucking picks would be. They share that info because to them, Korea should win, and then among that we can figure out who the best is. LPL, I know the coaches are all like in a like little secret cartel group where they all share stuff. So I feel like this is also where in the West, like, we're not even going to have that advantage of like the reconnaissance and like the information. We're just going to be going in blind, and then who knows? Listen, I'll tell you what, it will certainly be exciting. It will certainly be unexpected, but I just don't know how good it's going to be.
I have some fun stories on that actually. But the first thing I'd say is whenever something important is on the line, everyone does anything to get a lead start.
Right.
So everyone leaks and exchanges information. It's not necessarily just leaking and just giving, you're receiving something.
Sure.
It happens within the region every time there's Worlds on the line or an MSI event. At Worlds, regions leak to each other, and we've even had Korean teams leak like scrim strats to us from other Korean teams because they wanted to see the other team fail.
Oh, wow, right.
And we've been accused of, this was Season 7 MSI.
Oh, yeah.
The World Elite thought that we told TSM
Yes.
that they would play Lucian. Now, they, of course, don't know that as a Western team, there's no team you hate more than TSM and want to see lose more than TSM,
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
So it was a ridiculous kind of. They thought, oh, Western team, they're leaking information. Oh, hell no, brother, yeah. We're on your side. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I've seen it. I mean, I can say this now because I'm a coach. But like, I'm retired now, so I don't care anymore. But like, I've seen people like sometimes, you know, when you go to an international competition, you're in like a massive hotel. You know, it's so easy to find somewhere, you know, peaceful and quiet. You know, you go into somebody's bedroom. You know, you just have the talk there, or like, you know, go for a walk outside. I've seen people literally leak stuff in corridors.
Oh, wow.
You know, like we're all in the same scrim corridor with our scrim rooms. Like I've heard these things just happen, right? Like everyone knows it happens. You wish it didn't happen. Yeah. But like and I'm not going to say everyone does it equally, and I don't want to get into the weeds about who does what, because I'm just going to leave it as a general vague thing out there. I'm not going to say one region does it more or things like this, because I don't want to start an inter-regional war over it. But like, what I would say is, yeah, firstly, everyone hates TSM, but secondly, my headache. And then I just completely lost my track. Which is that. Oh yeah. Sorry about the Fearless draft. Yeah, and also it gives you a bit more preparedness for the weird stuff as well.
Yes.
Right. So if you've seen a lot of best of fives, that means you're more likely to have seen a Zoe. I think it was in the T1 series yesterday.
Yes.
There was a Zoe. Game 5, like maybe you've seen a Swain counter into Gallia or something. The Fearless, the thing which is scary about Fearless is that the first 2 or 3 games aren't that weird. But definitely when you get to game 5, like the last pick counter picks become very, very weird. The AD carry picks become weird. And those kind of things are going to impact the most. Like it's possible to force people onto either really, really bad AD carries or mages, and for certain players who are like really, really good AD carry players but not the best mage players, that lack of practice can really, really hurt them. And in EU, I would say that upsetted hands, for instance, are really at their best when they can play the AD carries. They can play mages, but like they're really, really at their best. You want hands to be on Draven, Lucian, Kalista, this kind of like early lane bully, which you're not going to get from the mages. And upset, you want him on his hyper carries or his Ezreal or something like this, right? And this is going like having to not have that practice or not been forced to innovate before first stand is going to hurt them for lack of practice.
I'd also say as well, this is almost like a league specific like advantage as well, because I'll give you an example. In Counter-Strike, you can't really like describe a whole strategy that someone does and how they run it, etc. Like they run it maybe differently against your team, or they make a call in the middle of the round. The only thing you can really do that's equivalent in Counter-Strike is sometimes someone works on like a secret map that you don't think they pick, and then they maybe just against one opponent they're going to use it. But the reason why in League it's so massive is there are like a bazillion champions in the game, and we're playing Fearless on top of that. So as a result, like you're saying, it's not even just the idea of like they even play this. The worst one ever is this is their counter to this other pick. That's like their pocket pick counter. Well, if you know one of the things that people, because you haven't seen it in EU yet, especially you haven't seen the BO5s, the thing I'm actually looking forward to, which I think is one of the downsides of Fearless and will actually ruin it, is the coaches who are going to use information like that to essentially like not tank a game, but use like arbitrary, what do you call it? What's the attrition? Use the concept that like I'll actually just waste your secret pick, counter pick in a first game, so now it's not used at all in the series. There's another thing. That's another. You don't even have to actually ever play against. It's not that you just prep like, oh, he's going to do this pick. You can just pick it earlier in the series, maybe even a different lane, and then now it isn't even available anymore. And if you are the other coach, you're just going to be going like, fuck it. That's one of my backups. That's like the thing I've got in my pocket in case things go wrong. So. Like I say, there will be a lot of novelty. Just what people haven't realised is not everything novel's brilliant. Like if you walk out your house one day, the postman goes, hey, go, you pick up the milk. If the next day you walk out, someone throws a pile of shit in your face, that is incredibly novel. No one expected that. That's really changed how your obvious day is. Don't know if it's better. We'll see. You can obviously place your own bets as to which coach the draft would be the equivalent of throwing a pile of shit in their face. Have fun at home in the comments, right? Okay, if we go on now, my ugly point is a mad biased one, but it's fucking opinion show, so don't worry about it. My ugly point, is I actually don't think right now Fnatic has a proper challenger yet. If you actually look at who G2 beat, they came on strong at the end. They even just beat some of the bad teams too. Some of the losses they'd suffered already were already kind of like a stain on the way that the group stage went. Meanwhile, if you look at Fnatic, they basically semi-fucked up one game. And aside from that, they looked pretty fucking good in all the other games. And the problem you had was, if you think of the narrative, it's like in week 1, it was supposed to be like, oh my God, is GX for real? Are they actually a contender? I don't think anyone even believes that now. Then you came to the whole thing of oh wait, no, it's Movistar Koi. It's the JoJo thing. That looked terrible in the last week. And then Carmine Corp is you just flip a coin. You flip a coin, they have an awesome game. Flip a coin, they're just all right, or it's just not as great. So I don't really know. Everyone expects it to be G2, but let's see on that one. I don't feel like at the moment there's an obvious contender that I'm sort of shadow boxing against Fnatic. At the moment, I could see 2-3 different teams in the final against some potential. What do you guys think?
So I think that as of now, Fnatic might be the strongest, but I think they're overrated and underperforming, although they're doing really well. But I'll put it in the context that I feel like there might actually be competition for them, but because of the meta and because of the lane swaps, there are certain weaknesses that are not yet being exposed, or that are really, I feel like the meta is playing so much into their favor that if you go at the start of the season, if you don't know, if you see the rosters and you think how is each team gonna want to play, I think okay, I want Gnar top lane, these kind of tanky top laners. I want control mages mid lane, and then I want my support jungle to be highly synergistic, and that's Fnatic's whole roster is that. And G2 is way more about top lane. It's more about AD carry. For example, like Fnatic dodging Draven, that's kind of in the meta, but they can dodge it. And I feel like the meta is so perfect for them right now that if the meta shifts, we might actually see some teams contending. And G2 would be the main one because you can't bet against caps in that regard. But even like a GX or Carmine Corp could make it a bit difficult for them.
Yeah. So on Fnatic, I think the lack of a real fearless format has kind of helped them a bit. I would say that Oscar has basically played. I'm just checking quickly. Yeah, he's only played 5 champions to split, which is whereas I think BB has played like 8. So I think that definitely helps him. Also those champions are within his comfort zone. What I would say though about Fnatic is, if you were to ask me last year, how do you beat Fnatic? The way you beat Fnatic is stall out Razork's early game, punish Oscar either in the 1v1. Although to be fair, he's not that punishable in the way he's like 1v1 laning is fine. It's like what he does after that one. Like if he has a disadvantage, he gets snowballed on really easily. And if he has an advantage, he doesn't do that much with his advantage, and his mid game is not like that insane. So if you ask me, like, I mean, not that insane for like a top 3 team, right? So if you ask me, how would teams go? They either would target Oscar, either by camping him or by punishing him in the mid game, or they would wait for a mistake from no origin. And I think that the problem with Fnatic right now is I do think that they are weaker, but I think definitely Mickey especially helps Oscar's weakness in the side lane because he's smart about when he's roaming to Oscar. So that makes it harder for you to target Oscar in the side lane. You can maybe target Oscar for overgrouping, but that implies you know how to play 3 lanes, and definitely there's like 3 teams in LEC, to be generous, that know how to play 3 lanes properly. So you can't really punish them in that way. And Mickey and Upset are much less likely to make like choking or whatever you want to call them mistakes than Noah and Junwa. So the problem I see with Fnatic is last year's Fnatic, you could just sit there and wait for them to make a mistake. Whereas this year's Fnatic, you actually have to beat them. You either have to beat them by punishing their mid jungle in the early game, which, there's only a limited number of teams that can do that, and I'm not sure G2 are one of them. Or you have to be able to play 3 lanes, or you have to be able to out team fight them. Like, so you actually have to have something special to beat them. And I think that makes it really, really hard, because generally teams which are more consistent will do better. So we just have to see. We have to see. But I think that there are different ways that different teams can beat them. But I don't think there's like a particular weakness that somebody can target, because the way you target Oscar is not sorry, it's not that easy, because like, let's say you put tons of jungle pressure top, you're just giving Mickey freedom on the map, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I think if you want to beat them, I don't think it's gonna be through being just straight up better at team fighting or play or out macroing them. I think there's a pretty clear blueprint, but I don't think there's any team that's going to be able to pull that off for 3 games. So what you can do is, like, you can have a very strong mid jungle duo that roams and controls the bot side of the map. You can draft a very strong 2v2 winning bot lane and try to use that to keep Mickey under his tower, or you can draft a winning bot jungle 3v3 and try to have your jungler controlling the bot side of the map mostly with your support. However, this is also the strength of the Fnatic roster. That this is what they're good at. So,
which leads into your good point. That's your good point anyway, right?
It is my good point. Yeah.
Let's do it then. Go.
What I really love about Fnatic is that they understand the strength of their roster and that they're playing towards it almost every single game. And why that is so commendable, because I feel like a lot of teams always try to go a little bit off track, and I feel like even G2 last year, that played together for 2 years, at the end of the year still didn't know what the strengths of their roster was, and they kept like changing up strategies when they really shouldn't be doing that. So Fnatic coming in and pretty much nailing it from the very first moment and is very commendable. I guess that's partly coaching staff, but also the ego of the players, because, you know, if you're always playing towards bot side of the map, it's very easy for a mid laner or top laner to just go like, hey, what about me? I want to look good. Give me some love. So I just think that's very commendable, and that is giving me somewhat hope for the LEC internationally, like Fnatic is. Because not many teams can do that. Not many teams have the right egos to just give it up and understand that, and also be able to read like the player skill level.
Okay, what do you think, Peter?
I mean, I think that's right. I think also, obviously, as we said before, they're helped a little bit by the meta. But like definitely, if you ask me, which teams in Europe are realistic about where they're strong and where they're weak, I would say Fnatic, sure. Koi, I think, have like a decent idea. Jojo still has to fit into that team, but I think they understand that they're not going to like out rotate and out macro, like they're just going to play 2 lanes and they're going to like hard commit on 2 lanes. And then they're going to team fight you on objectives. So I think Koi can specialize in a way to kind of counter Fnatic. What else? Who else can do it? I think G2 don't have a good idea over what their identity is at all. I think it's what they expect from Skumond is very different to what he was doing in the ERLs. K-Corp, I'm not sure what K-Corp's identity is yet. I mean, it makes sense, right? It's a lot of new players coming together. So yes, I think Fnatic out of the top teams, I definitely agree on that. And I think that's what makes them strong. It's also what makes them dangerous. Potentially also what makes them easier to scout for like a Gen, you know, a Damonkey or Genji or whoever goes internationally from Korea or China, of course.
Yeah, I will actually say this is why it's so funny that because of all the years of dominance of G2 and the fact that everyone had heard this insane hype about the Skumon guy, that he's going to be like the Caps of Jungle and just revolutionise the game. That's why, if you notice, everyone before the split just went like, right, obviously I'm going to pick G2 as number 1 in the league. And then after that, they were like, oh, and Fnatic should be really good, etc. But first of all, this was the team Fnatic that, if you know behind the scenes, they got all the hype of like, they win all the scrims. Like, it's actually the best team immediately, like almost from minute 1. And actually, you could actually look at this roster on paper in the offseason and go, that should just work. Like, that's actually just a really good fucking roster, mate. You've upgraded the bot lane. You've added Mickey who isn't just a support, but basically, like, my joke would be, this is why I think the bot lane is like mad underrated in that team before the split. It's because Upset is someone who played with Hylissang at his peak. That means you have to know how to play 1v2. And you have to know when you aren't going to just be only in the lane and the guy's going to leave and go for a crazy play on the other screen. So because he already knows how to do that anyway, in this team, it makes like Mickey X becomes, I don't know what Peter means, becomes like a second jungler sometimes in the team, which I've always thought is like a mega like ace up your sleeve if you have that in a support player, as opposed to just the guy that like just plays in the lane or just groups with the team. Like that's why when you see teams play against this team, it's not just Razork anymore. They have to look out for like, is there an angle where Razork and Mickey X are coming in and suddenly we're just like gangbanged in the mid lane or something, or they're like they do base and just path top lane the whole time and come through the brush. Like, that's why I said it's almost like second jungler the guy can operate as. And you think of the champions he plays all the champions that you can dive on and hook people on and all that shit, so it's just fire. So I agree with you though, YoungBuck. Basically, the beauty of this lineup is it's just streamlined. It's one of the reasons why, if people don't know, whenever I do those AMA type questions where someone will go, you know, build like a hypothetical Western team to win, right? They always get really mad that I don't pick like Wonder or something like that. I'll often pick like Soaz as my top laner, or sometimes I'll even say Odoamne, and they'll be like, what the hell? Odoamne isn't as good as one Prime Wonder. It's like, yeah, but the difference is if I have Odoamne as my top laner and then my AD carries like Forgiven or Upset, there's not even a discussion before the game about which lane are we playing to, guys. Like, everyone in that room knows exactly where we're playing to. It's really simple at that point in time. Now I can get other things that are more complicated going because the basic concept and the flow of the team is just set. Like, we know where it's going to go. It's definitely the case here. Like, I just don't think you're ever going to see them play for like super carry top lane picks. It doesn't matter even if Foscarigan can play it in solo queue. He's also, by the way, the youngest, least experienced member of the team. He hasn't really even got the position to sort of demand the attention. So I can see why it's worked from the outset. Obviously, it kind of ties into my ugly point. If G2 or someone had been Mega or Movistar had been the truth, maybe they wouldn't be the absolute best, but this did look like the most obvious roster that should be really good. And even with all the things about Fearless, it's still hard to see them being worse than like top 2. You know what I mean? I mean, you guys struggle to come up with teams that can actually beat them on any angle, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, I think that it's also something that as a rookie, you kind of have to have a bit of humility when you come into league because, at ERL, if you are a Paris or you are a Skewmont, right? You can literally do whatever the fuck you want.
Right.
Right? Like you are just so much better than the other team. It's a case of, I can murder them with my with my Zyra, or I can like murder them more slowly with Maokai, right? But that
Right.
doesn't mean that you can play both Zyra and
Sure.
Maokai at LEC level, and just recognizing, firstly, it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice who you are, right? It doesn't mean you have to become a tank jungler, right? But it means that you have to be willing to streamline your practice, and maybe you could play. I just use Yike for this, right? Like Yike decided that the champion that he was going to play and he was going to like play a ton of at LEC was Belveth, right? So it's clearly a decision. Like he was able to go and say, okay, I could play all of these carry picks at ERL level, but at LEC level, I'm going to mainly focus on Belveth. I'm going to have a couple of other picks, but generally I'm going to play for the team, or I'm going to have a couple of carries. The other one, he had two. The other one just slips my mind, but I just but I remember that they put a lot of time, even in scrims, into Belveth, and I think that that's something you just have to do as a rookie because you are not coming in and like out champion pooling somebody in your first play. Like even Caps wasn't doing that,
Oh,
right? Like
sure.
to Perks in his first play, right? Like it's just they just know more than you, right? They have played more games than you, and maybe you can catch up to them in a year or 2 years. But there is no way that like I mean we're on Fnatic, so I'll talk about Oscar, right? But there's no way that Oscar is going to come in and he's going to have as good a Cho'Gath, right?
Oh,
Like
sure.
as Brokenblade, because he's just not playing
Yeah,
Cho'Gath
yeah.
that much at URL level.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I kind of agree with you with
And
that.
oh, by the way, also on that point, that's obviously another classic thing that actually people saw at this Worlds when they did that stupid like FlyQuest Nunu pick. The joke was even modern like LCK players were like, "I've never played against Nunu. Like, what does it even do?" Like, that's a real factor for veterans. Like, if you're a rookie and that wasn't a meta champion, and you're like 18 years old, you probably never played the first 100 champions or some of them like ever in a game. Maybe even in solo queue it wasn't picked. So that's like a real factor. Because like you say, Pete, the problem is if you're like super hands or you're just super sharp at the game, you're just doing stuff because you're just way better than people. You're not actually like that good on all the champions. That's why people do get overhyped from ERLs, because you go look at the Leaguepedia, it's like, oh my god, he is the truth. He can do everything. It's like, yeah, he's not playing against Trophy though, is he? He's just playing against like some guy in Vitality B, Okay then, Peter, you hyped it. So should we go into your good point then? Because obviously it's about Fearless, in it.
So I wanted to the ugly point before the good point because I think that my good point is that the current we are now going into Fearless, and this is a really, really good thing because there's certain players on certain teams who've just been able to hide in the current meta. And basically before this, I went to check how many individual champions people have played, and basically, I'm putting 5 as my like limit. So if you look at players who play 5 or fewer champions over 9 games, which is low, right? So normally an average should be about 6 or 7. You have Kamilu and Vladdy from mid, who played 5. Everyone else has played like 7 plus. And from top lane, you have Oscar, Mirwin, and Irrelevant. Now, Mirwin definitely can play more than 4 champions. He's just being told, just play these 4 champions, right? Like, because I'm certain he wants to go and play Fiddlesticks, or he wants to go and play Varus, because I've coached this guy before. He definitely wants to play something weird. I don't know what he wants to play weird, but he's got something cooking, right? Like, I don't know what it is. I'm sure we're going to find out this weekend. But in theory, this should help. Like, in theory, it's easier to hide a small champion pool in a non-fearless format. And if you have a small champion pool, you will get like tested very, very quickly, right? Like, so this is not to hate on Kamilu, but I just mention it because he's the mid laner who's played the least. Kamilu has played 4 of his 9 games on Victor, right? Humanoid is a decent Victor. The last time Kamilu played Victor blind, Humanoid countered with Hui, which is his like historical counter, and had a really, really good game. So either they're going to have really good counters to Victor, or if Victor isn't picked, like let's say Heretics are on blue side in game 1, they're just going to pick Victor 3, and then you're not going to have Victor for the rest of the series, right? So you're kind of, if you've had a certain champion or champions that have been crutches for you, in a best of 3, you're going to get really, really hard punished. And I think that I think it's important that people recognize. Like I think even if teams struggle now because they're flipping into Fearless, I think it's a good thing now to have that exposed so that you can adapt to it going forward into the season. And if you ask me who's going to benefit from Fearless, G2 are going to benefit because BB can play really weird stuff, but really weird like tank stuff. He can play carries, obviously. Like I think most people who are in the LEC in this year can play like Camille, they can play Nah, they can play Renekton. Like I think most people can play this. Not all at the same level, but they can play it to like an 8 out of 10 level, right? But there's very few people who can play Zac. There's very few people who can play Cho'Gath. There's very few people who can play like.
I mean, he had Rek'Sai, if you remember, at one point in time.
Yeah. I mean, Rek'Sai in the meta as well, but like, yeah, there's very few people who have that flexibility, so I think that benefits G2. I don't think they're going to beat Fnatic, but it does benefit them. I think it benefits Koi, but the danger with Koi, and I'm going to say here, I have a soft spot for Koi because Mirwin and Jojo are my ex-players, and I've liked Alvaro for years, right? So I have a soft spot for Koi, and Melza, obviously, I like him too. But like the problem that Koi have is that they were still trying to find their identity at the end of those 3 weeks, and now Mirwin is unleashed because we're now into Fearless. So that's a challenge. So I'm interested to see what they come up with, because definitely that can go down in flames because they're already struggling with their identity. But maybe they've discovered now that they can put Mirwin on all these carries, and Jojo now has a more defined identity. So he's just playing roamers, and I think that's maybe a good thing. But like I said, it should in theory benefit Koi. It will definitely benefit G2, and I think it will hurt. It will hurt certain teams. It will hurt Fnatic for sure. It will hurt Heretics. It will hurt maybe Vitality. And the thing that I'm really, really interested is GX, because sure, Lot has played a lot of different champions, but I'll give a free piece of scouting advice here. Like, his Rumble is actually god tier. He's like almost Oda one day Rumble level, right? Because Rumble covers a lot of his weaknesses in team fighting. So it will be interesting to see when Rumble is taken away, because it's a high priority pick now, what he will default to as a series goes down, and whether that means GX are going to go more try to enable him on a side lane, or whether they're going to continue to team fight with him, because that's not obviously his greatest strength as a top laner. So my good point basically is Fearless now will benefit certain teams, Koi G2, and it will force teams that are hiding players now. They're not going to be able to hide anymore, and I think it's a good thing now because first stand will happen, and there's actually a reasonable gap until spring, so it will give people the time to discover those things now, whereas another format might not allow that discovery to happen.
If I think about Fearless, I would more study the role, because if I'm a top laner, I'm not really worried for Oscar. I feel like there's so many tank champions you can always lock in and find, or something. Even if you're like, if you can't find a tank, you can find a Rumble or a Cannon, something that has a lot of utility for a team. And in worst case, you maybe do something with a global so you can help your bot side of the map. I think that top lane won't have that much impact as you might think, but it's in the context of the meta. So in different metas, it could be like if you have like a Camille, Fiora, Gwen, Jace meta. There, a team like Fnatic could really struggle if they have to go deep into the champion pool. I think in this meta, Oscar will stand up, and I think the other role that's probably the least impacted is support, because I feel like if you're an engaged player, you'll be able to find an engage, and in the worst case, you play Braum Tam. I think it fits almost every support that is like in a top team right now. I'm actually curious to see like how most AD carries will do in that kind of format. I think a lot of the LEC AD carries have like very specific strengths and have like 3 or 4 champions there, and there's a lot of times there's overlap. So yeah, I'm curious to see if we're going to see something unusual there. Like for example, Upset, I don't think he's going to play a mage or should play a mage, so he's probably going to play something a little bit more off meta later on in the series. And for mid lane, I think it's maybe more. I think in this meta, players will get away with it. Now, I think jungle might be something where it's very difficult to find the same kind of playstyle that you want every single draft. and you have to maybe explore like a different kind of play style. Like if I was G2, maybe you want to have something like Syndra, Lee Sin, or something crazy like that, something that's very mid jungle focused, just to try and beat Fnatic. But I think most roles in this meta aren't that impacted, so I feel like it doesn't change a whole lot to like the power of the teams.
Okay. Right. Yeah, go on, Peter. Go on.
So last point on this. I will say that there is one person whose time to shine in this meta, which is Flacket. You know, it's Seraphine, Ziggs players unite. You know, it's a time. It's the time, Flacket.
Yes. AKA the EG 2022 summer champion pool for ADC, right? Okay. The secret hidden path. Okay. Right, okay, on this topic, right, one of the reasons why for top lane, that's actually one of the only roles I am excited for fearless drafting. Because one of the things is, I'm just thinking of like that match I just saw in the LTA where FlyQuest played against Dignitas and Bwipo did that like ridiculous like Garen bait. That's like some shout at solo queue where if the other person hasn't played Garen, you just like bait them in and like they think they have the kill on you, and it's like the joke is like you're locked in here with me. Like I was baiting you in the whole time, you idiot. That was the kill for me. Because then if the other guy's some like rookie player, or again he didn't play certain champions, because obviously in the modern day, who the fuck even still plays Garen? Like it's still not a thing now. It's still a weird pick. So first of all, there'll be some of those, which is always just fun when people have like specialist knowledge on a champion. If people don't know, that part of Adam's game I even sort of fuck with. I just don't like him as a person, that's all, and a teammate. Like I actually do like the idea that like you would think, well, Darius isn't even a champion, but that's like, yeah, but his Darius isn't the same as the other Darius, you know, and he knows it in the 50 matchups, whereas you think you played it that one time and solo queue. And then also, I do think since you're going to get so many matchups, people have just almost never played. If you go deep in a BO5, you're going to get those games where people can actually use as a top lane. This isn't always the case. Actual macro knowledge, like you can have people do like Baus FFF type shit, where it's like it doesn't actually matter if they die a couple of times in the lane, as long as either they hit their item power spike or later on they know that they can like come back in the matchup. And again, we're used to, especially actually top lane sometimes is really, especially in LEC by the way, sometimes top lanes, as much as people bitch about the mid lane being like Azir, Corki and fucking Orianna, there's times where the top lane's like 3 champions, it's just like who picked which and then who's doing the counter into that. So I also think the counter angle is also interesting, because you've all seen this as coaches, right? The most dreaded line that the top laner says is he goes, it's all right, because I even though I don't play that champion, which is broken as fuck, coach, everyone's playing it and winning all the games. It's all right because I play the counter, right? The reason why that is so cursed is, one, you better be fucking amazing at that counter, bro. Like, they're getting free wins on that, and we're probably just going to be giving it up to them. But also, that doesn't always work in game 4 of a fearless draft, and here's why. Because you might have a counter, but it's not even available in game 4. Now you might have to have like 3 counters because you're not playing that. So, or you use the counter in game 2 or something like that, you know, like that, and then you have a different, that was your count for 2 champions and now it's gone. This is why I think the problem is, this is why you can tell in LEC. I don't know why people in LEC even comment on Fearless. We haven't done it. We're just watching other regions going, is that good? I mean, I guess it was exciting for T1. Like that's, again, we're viewers again. You have to ask how they're going to play it out. Like there's so many wacky angles can come from this draft in my opinion. So I'm with you though. The top lane one will be fun. This is where, again, sadly, all the great changes are just great for my players that are all retired now, right? Can I go back in time machine? Soaz, we're bringing you out, mate. This is your era, mate. Your first time in shit on stage. That was like half of your career. That was like his party trick. He'd be loving this shit, mate. He would have something in game 5. It's like, yeah, I just play Teemo. Like, what? Like, he would do some shit like that.
Yep. I think it's also strategic comfort, right? Like, just because you're like an LEC caliber team fighter on like 2 or 3 champions. This is as a rookie coming in. I think it's really good against the rookies. Just because you're an LEC caliber team fighter, on, like I just mentioned, Lot. It's nothing, no hated on Lot. No. It's just that like just because he has a really good rumble, just because he has a good Gnar, doesn't mean that he can do it on every single champion. Which means that impacts everything, because now they have to go and start thinking about how they're going to go and play more for side push and this kind of thing. So I think that's a thing. It's also good because I think it forces people out of their comfort zone. And you know what I want to see. And I mentioned Heretics here. What I want to see is a Seraphine. What I want to see is a Carlson Fiora top. Like his Fiora top is really, really insane. That's like that was his one trick, Fiora, right? So, but obviously he would never get to play Fiora outside of a fearless format. So I hope we get to see that. I hope we get to see Irrelevant push himself more, right? Because he can play more champions, he just never does, right? So that's what I'm kind of hoping for. But yeah, let's go and see what we get.
Right, my good point is just going to be a general LEC role topic, and it goes like this. It's the strength of the support role in the LEC now. First of all, if you went back a few years, man, that was the most top-heavy role in the entire fucking region. Like, the joke was, if you didn't have Hylissang and Mickey X, like, good luck. Like there almost isn't even anyone. And in fact, that's a role, by the way. We've tried a million rookies out. We've brought people through constantly. And I always thought, if you look at the history of League of Legends, I've obviously watched all of it through all the years, the biggest gap in most eras for me always was like the best LCK support versus the Western. I mean, you can even see it now with Kerry, mate. Like, it's still nuts the things he can do. The joke is, first of all, he would bait all the Westerns into trying that shit, and you know their coaches are saying, "You're not Kerry, mate. You can't play that specific AD carry Trimby. Stop fucking picking it." Like, that was a real thing. And then also, that's why if you ever go and look at historically Western teams that have done the best, like had the big international run, I wrote it down. They basically had these 5 support players and no one else. They had, in the early days, you had to have Mithy or Yellow Star. That was the only 2 choices early on. Then after that, obviously Hylissang and Mickey X. And then in NA, you have to have Core JJ. If you don't have those players at support, good luck when you play the LPL or the LCK team in a best of 5. Like, that one gap that, even though to a fan, support is the most invisible role in the game unless they roam, by the way. In a team fight, no one looks at the McHales. No one knows when you actually, like, fucking, like, bait out. In fact, I even think a lot of people, it's the shot across the bow, but I'll just say, I think a lot of Westerners don't really actually understand how the fucking Renata Glass works in some of the team fights, because some of the times I see people like cheering on core streams and I'm like, bro, they're about to lose. Like, that's actually going to fucking turn this whole fight around, and that wasn't a kill in that sense that you thought it was. So I think if you look now, I'll just quickly run down the names. So on Fnatic, we've got Mickey X. We've got Labrov, who was mega last year on BDS. He's on G2, obviously. That was in theory there, like side grade / upgrade. You've got Alvaro, who looked like a sensation when he first came into the league last year. Hylissang himself is still there. Yes, obviously questionable what his level is. He's still Hylissang, though. Here's the thing. As bad as he might be in some games, he's still going to have one game where he just slaps you upside the head. That's still going to happen every now and then. You've got Jun, who, remember, at the end of, like, whatever it was, spring last year going into MSI, he was probably like top 2 in the league. He was kind of like turning Fnatic's whole fortunes around. The Paris guy, as we've talked about in past episodes, is potentially someone G2 wanted, and he was super hyped, and everyone just basically says, let's see if he works on this specific BDS. And then the last one is the one that last week, Stend, Peter basically pointed out, no one's really paying attention, but that's actually someone he had picked from the ERLs as someone who should be really good. Like, bro, and Tag Armas that I've left at the end. But by the way, Carmi Corp's doing well. Like, look, maybe people hate on Tag Armas, but whatever. He's not in the worst spot lane. So, bro, like, the floor's pretty crazy, and the top end's pretty good too. And then you look at even some of those newer ones, like the Parises of the world. Maybe like next year this could be the strongest role in Europe or something. What do you think, YoungBuck?
No, I agree. And it is funny because I was in the whole Mickey X Hylissang era, and if you didn't have one of those two, it's just almost impossible to win a title. And it's a very undervalued role, but both by the community and for salaries. Like, they're always criminally underpaid. But if you think about building a proper roster, there is an argument to be made that the support is the most important piece of the puzzle. Because usually the support needs to have like a synergetic playstyle with your mid lane and the jungle for it to be a very valuable signing, and for someone to really elevate a roster. So players like Mickey and Hylissang, they work really well with junglers and with mid laners because they're very active on the map. They lane well. They have that kind of package. And now you're right. I think that even like some of the weaker supports, like Targamas is very roster dependent, but he does have the type of roster where he can function. Like, he needs a very strong AD carry, and mid lane I'll have a bit of a question mark on, but you want to have like very strong aggressive solo lanes that can like use a lead, and I think Kana is one of those players. So the role is very strong, and itself, and I think for the first time in a very long period, maybe a decade, we have more than 5-6 good supports. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, Kaiser's still there in academy. You know, somebody rescue him, please.
You can't be helped, Peter. It's all good. Well, I love about you. So you never give up on people, do you, Peter? Like, put it this way: in real life, if I ever do become like an alcoholic or drug addict, you're the one person who might be able to come and still believe in me and pull me out of it, Peter. Everyone else will just give up on me, cast me aside, but you'll never stop believing. I love that. I appreciate it.
So what I'm going to say is that the YoungBuck, actually, this is one thing that YoungBuck as a coach was very, very good at, right? Like, and this is something recognizing the importance of the support role, because I remember there was the split where you brought in Mickey for Advienne, right?
Yeah.
And the amount of shit that Excel got for that move, holy moly, right? Like, and obviously, it's obvious who was right in the end.
He was
right?
like the sleeper MVP of the split. Yeah, he was mad. Yeah.
But it's a case that like it just shows you how little fans understand support, how little they value it, right? Like how little teams value it. The fact that you guys were even able to get Mickey was like crazy to me at the time.
It was.
And it was, at least now people are beginning to come around to it. 3 years later, and yeah, even with the Tagamas thing, right? Like that's very much a Rehan thing, right? Like the kickoff coach, right? Like he has a vision for how he wants his team to play, and Tagamas fits into exactly what he wants. So it's like you, even when you don't have these amazing all around supports, you have them being fit into very specialized roles. So that shows an improvement, at least in EU's team building philosophy, right? And to be clear, like I think Paris is more like that than the all. Like I think Paris is people see Paris as this like amazing all around player. I think at ERL he definitely was. But we'll see at LEC. For now, I'm not convinced, and I wasn't convinced last year that he could be. Like I think Alvaro is somebody. When I saw him at ERL, I thought that he could be all around in LEC. Paris, I didn't think. I think he would be a really like good specialized type support, a bit like Tagamas. Sorry. But but lots of other people disagree, so we'll wait to see who's right on that. But obviously, I still think he's going to be good in LEC. But I fully agree with you on the sport being important, and I think it's something that has been massively underrated for years. And I think the last two coaches you had, YoungBuck this week and Sheepy last week, were basically two of the only coaches. The other coaches in the LEC who like kind of understood this, right? So
we both had Hillsang, so yeah.
Yeah, Hillsang, exactly.
That helps. That'll convince you that Sport's a pretty good role. Yeah, true. Right, go then. What is your bad point for this episode, YoungBuck? What are we going with?
So my bad point is that we might be seeing the end of the G2 dynasty. And I don't mean that they're going to have a bad year. I mean they're going to have a bad couple of years. And
okay.
Yeah,
right.
I'm going to take it really
Come
far.
on.
I'm going to take it really far, okay? So I think their roster, first of all, so I think they downgraded both roles and that they're also now a dysfunctional roster with very high individual skill, but I don't see many metas where they are going to be very successful. I don't think Caps and Skumant are a very good combination, and if Caps is your carry, like your best player, you want people around him that work well with him. I don't think Yike was actually that great of a match for him. I think someone like Razok and Elyoya would do much better. Um, Having said that, I think Skumon is a bit more of an extreme version of Yike, and that doesn't function well at all with the type of mid laner that Caps is. I don't think it functions well with a strong side top laner, which Broken Blade leans a bit into, and therefore I think they might not have a great year. I can still see them win a title or so, but I don't think they're gonna like be a happy-go-lucky team. I don't think they're gonna be consistently at the top. And then there's something that's going to happen that could change everything for G2, and that's Caps' contract is running out, and so is someone else's that is very, very enticing to look at. Like I see a very obvious roster move next year, which is Caps to Fnatic, and that could end G2 for a couple of years.
Okay, well, he instantly came with the heat there, Peter. So where are we going on this one, mate?
I mean, that's a banger point. Like, holy moly, I didn't realize Marek's contract expand next year. Like I mean, what I would say for this is, firstly, that's very, very interesting. I would love to see it happen. Like, I would love to see them swap mid laners just for the shit show that we would see. In it. I take your point. about Skumon. I agree that Skumon's a more extreme version of Yike. I think Caps is so good that he can play multiple roles. But he's forced to play. You don't get the best out of him if you play him with somebody like Yak or like somebody like Skumon. So I agree with that. But as you were talking, I was thinking, who in the ERLs right now is good enough to kind of fill that role at that level? And there is nobody.
There's no one.
When I'm thinking about kind of the best supportive junglers in ERLs, it's like Douglas. Like the other ones are all like really, really good carry junglers. And honestly, Skewmond is just better at being a carry jungler than all of those guys. So you don't have any of those supportive guys coming up, which is interesting. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't be able to swap their way out of it. Huh.
No, the only roster move that would never happen is someone like Jankos, but I don't think that fixes the entire roster.
Yeah, I see it. I see it. I think definitely if you were bringing in Skew, I wouldn't. I can understand why they gambled, but I think gambling on both at the same time is really, really dangerous.
Exactly.
And just because it worked out for you 2 years ago, it's because you went from Targamas to Mickey, right? Like it's like that. I think that's it. So I can see it. It's a big claim to make. I will reserve judgment until next year, but definitely I can see this year. If Cap stays, I think G2 are fine. I think if Cap stays, G2 are fine, right? But if he goes, it's going to be really, really rough. The only thing is there any team that's going to outpay G2? Maybe Fnatic. But the thing is, I don't see. I think the years that Vitality is spending 3 million on a player are over. I think that I can't think of any other team because Koi aren't going to spend more than 1 million on a player. So it's only Fnatic or G2. So the only org that Caps could really go to is G2. Maybe BDS. Maybe BDS could pay 1 million. I could see BDS paying 7 figures. But yeah, he's going to get paid. It would be so funny. Sorry, G2 fans, but it would just be so funny to see Caps go to Fnatic. Even if it failed, it would still be funny.
It would be so hyped, though.
It would be so. It would be so.
Comeback
so
of the one.
Return of the prodigal son.
Great storyline.
But yeah, definitely the off-season moves that they did, just because it worked 2.5 years ago, doesn't mean that it's going to work now. And I think that they gambled 2.5 years ago, and then convinced themselves it wasn't a gamble, and then gambled again, and this time they rolled Snake Eyes, right? So it's so it's I'm with you on that. But let's see the next one. See, whatever happens though, Caps is going to get paid, and he's already the highest paid player in EU.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I had a few players tell me there's a salary cap currently in the LEC, and it's only 200k this year. It was 400k last year. So I don't think anyone's going to outpay them. And then if I'm Caps, if I had to choose one jungler and one support to play with, it would be actually Razork and Mickey, and they happen to be on the same team. Yeah. So I think at that point, just take whoever is AD carry or top for granted and just go there. So I think it's pretty logical.
I've got a quick question on this. Is it hard salary cap or soft salary cap? Because I wasn't involved in roster building on Heretics because
In other words, is it like the LCK where you can just pay more money over the top, but it goes to the rest of the teams or something? Is it something like that?
I don't think so.
I thought it was every euro you pay over the salary cap goes into pool and is then split with the other teams. But if it's a hard salary cap, well, anyway, the point is that if it is a hard salary cap and that's what they've got in place, they should say something because it makes it makes a difference to the fans, to the fan experience. Because then that salary table that Sheep Esports has, if the gap between the top team, I imagine the gap between the top team and the bottom team is 1 million, right? I think it's somewhere between 1.5 to 500k. But if the gap is 1 million to 900k, then it's much less impressive if you're the ninth highest paying roster. So that's what I would say on that. I mean, if it is a hard salary cap, then okay, my point doesn't stand. If it's not, that makes it even less likely that even fewer teams that would be willing to go over the salary cap.
Yeah, I don't know if it's hard or soft. I just know that existing contracts, they don't have to get lowered, but at least that's what I've heard.
Right.
Okay. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, right. There's a bunch of angles here. First of all, it's a controversial take because they did win every split except one after they signed Yike. But I actually always thought that was a crazy gamble. I mean, if people forget, everyone forgets the off-season drama. They weren't trying to trade Jankos for Yike. They were trying to get El Yoya, and supposedly the deal was almost done, and then bizarrely it just turned around. If people don't know, that's actually why he's had all these years within Mad Lions where there's been all internal conflict. He was just stuck in Mad Lions again. So basically, I always thought Bro, just bring in hands, isn't that? No, if you keep Jankos, you keep Mickey X, you keep all the rest of the team, you just bring in Broken Blade and you bring in hands. That's the move to me. So I always thought it was crazy they went for the Yank gamble anyway, because, look, even though they did win all the splits, I'd say what, they didn't look as dynamic a team internationally. I often thought, actually, that's where you would see Yank have a good game, but the rest of them have a bad game, or you have a not good game, but then the Lanes have a good game. I always thought, if you're going to bring Broken Blade in, the weirdest thing about the way they constructed this G2 with the 3 carry roles is... You're not really going to get the most out of Broken Blade, actually, in that scenario, because in the Hansama teams, I've just talked to so many teammates and coaches, they say you basically have to play his way. Like, you play lane dominant, you play through him, you get his champions are powered up, and then he goes and you move around the map and you kill everyone, right? The problem is, if you have Broken Blade, there's going to be metas where you want to play a carry top, mate. You want to have all those really aggressive champions and the weird picks that we're talking about before. But instead, in this team, he does sort of default. It's like what Wonder used to do. He could play carry top, but when he has, like, the perks Mickey X bot lane, he's probably just going to play the tank and play the bruiser and just going to be awesome in a team fight. That's going to be his job. So I don't think you get the full aspect of Broken Blade in that sense. And for me, if you'd have had Jankos, you could also just service Broken Blade and Caps way better. And then I'd also just throw out there on the Caps contract thing. That is why the most interesting detail I want people to track this year goes like this. Do you get an announcement before the off-season that he's re-signed with G2? Because if you don't, I don't know technically if they still operate on the Carlos rules, but the Carlos rules go that if we don't re-sign you on the last year, you're definitely going at that point in time. Like, at that point, like, basically, I'm going to even try and sell you if possible. Like if someone came in around summer, maybe I'll even sell you so I can get value out the contract. Like, that's why he would always make people re-sign when it was coming up to the last year. And essentially, that's why it's implied in some of the other lineups that when people didn't do the re-sign, basically, you can just look at the clock. It's ticking for you. You know it's over. Like, you're not going to be there after that. So the idea you would ever let Caps, this is why the Kasari Cap angle would be interesting. The idea you would ever let Caps test free agency is crazy, because unless he has a bad year, he's the most eligible free agent ever. And people forget this. He's still only like 25. He's not like 29 and this is his last year clinging on. Bro, this guy could still keep going for 3-4 years as an elite player, maybe even as good. And then, I agree with you, YoungBuck, because the other thing that could change this is, if there's a soft salary cap, I can tell you that the difference is, a normal team just gets the budget from the GM, and then they just pick. It's like those fucking jokes of like, pick 4 albums. You have $15. There's the $5 album, and you can't always pick all the $5 ones. You pick a $5 one, a $3 one, and 2 ones that are cheap, right? Normally that's what you're doing. But I can tell you, if you're getting a player that isn't just an amazing player that could win you the championship, which by the way you imply into your calculation. What if we win? What if we win the prize money? What if we win go to Worlds? That changes the sponsor dynamic. But I can tell you, if it's someone with a massive name like a Caps, you can quite literally just get your org to go to sponsors, and sometimes one sponsor will just say, okay, I'll come in for like 2 million more to get that guy because I want to be a part of. By the way, in the past, people like Reckless, etc. People have gone to NA teams. Like, this is like a massive factor as to why when you sign some of these players, you're not going to bench them at that point in time, because there's actually business considerations that are massive. So even though Fnatic is not traditionally a team in the last few years that spends huge, if you can get Caps back, and by the way, let's just roll this in there as well. He was supposed to be their mid laner for the whole time. So if you're Sam Matthews, bro, if you can ever pull the trigger on this one, it doesn't. You gamble on that 1 year at that point, not least because, by the way, it's just one of the only times you can ever be like, okay, Carlos, I actually got one over you this time, which hasn't happened about 10 times in a row now. In fact, the joke is it's only them getting given Mickey X that's made them look like they've got that on the other side. And then the one other angle for that would be, the other angle you could potentially shade, because I agree, a lot of the like regional based teams probably aren't going to spend massively. In fact, they've obviously gone towards people from the RLs that are cheaper, and they've already got the coaches that guy's going to go to. There's 2 other angles here. One would be, if Fnatic is awesome this year, bro, if Fnatic plays the way they do right now with Razork and Mickey X, and I'll lose to that as Caps, like 2 or 3 splits. It's like you say, YoungBuck, why don't I just play with them? I'm better than Humanoid. Why don't I just go and play with them? And then I'll win everything. I'll be back to being the number 1 dominant team. It would even just be an appealing move. And then also there's the whole angle of like, there might still yet be a world where a Falcons or some super mega loaded Saudi team comes and buys in. If they come and buy in, by the way, and there's a soft salary cap, I'll tell you what, Caps, you can get paid fucking LCS money if you want now, mate. Like, if they're willing to also pay all the other teams the extra cash, which, by the way, if you're really cynical, you could just say, we'll win all the splits, then we get like whatever, 120k extra. We can value that into the equation. So depends how crazy people are with the gamble. I have to say though, just narratively, it would be the craziest hype angle ever if you get Caps goes back to Fnatic, and then he's even like united with Mickey X again. Like, if if you're G2, that's like the one off-season ever where the G2 fans are going to be like, this sucks. This is what it's like to be in the other teams. Like, this fucking blows. Like, we've got a worse team now. That could be the world. And also, if everyone in the LEC is going to make fun of Humanoid for all these years, and then if you're G2, you have to replace Caps with Humanoid, like, good luck selling that to the fans, mate. Just good luck selling that. It's going to be a hard sell. I don't know what clever marketing campaign you're going to come up with that one. And you know what? In the end, you will have to admit no one is perfect. You're right.
I mean,
no one is perfect.
Caps is also one of the few players that would get Asian offers.
And sure.
It doesn't mean that he would go to LPL or LCK, but agents aren't stupid, right?
No, you play that against other teams. Yeah, exactly.
You play that against the other teams. Which
by the way, that's it. If someone like Falcons came in, and I can tell you from CS, they are willing to literally pay. Like, they don't even just do like we do $1 above the salary amount. They just go, should we just double it? And then they just see if you say yes, right? If a team like that comes in, here's what you do, Caps as agent. You go like Peter says, you get the ridiculous LPL team that gives you the insane offer, and then you just take that to Falcons and go beat that. They don't know you would ever go into the LPL anyway, of course, but you just play them off against each other. No, I'm with you on that one.
And that's if there's a soft salary cap, and if there is a hard salary cap, just go and take make
the best roster.
Just go to LPL, right? Like if
I
don't know if it's a soft salary cap, do that and stay in EU. But if there's a hard salary cap and the most you can get is 200k, just go and get your million.
That would be crazy. It's the only way you're going to get millions in this era. Yeah,
exactly. Like LPL has a salary cap too.
Yeah.
It is a hard salary cap, but the way that, for people that don't know, the way that LPL players get paid is that they sign a contract with the team, which is within the hard salary cap, and then they sign, what's it called, sponsorship agreements, or like
it's like some Man City shit here. I see what you're doing. Okay,
right. Exactly. So they're not being you are getting paid more than the hard salary cap, right? Like everyone knows it, right? Like this is not like a top secret thing that I'm leaking, right? But yeah. So if it's a hard salary cap in EU, just go and get your Chinese money. Like somebody will pay, right? Like so that will be fun.
Yeah.
Still 18 months away, but obviously, like, you know, you have to show that. I mean, maybe there's still a world where G2 turns it around, but yeah, I'm with YoungBuck on this one, right? Like, there's
so definitely... I think part of my narrative is that when I look at the G2 games, I just don't see anything inspiring or like extremely high level or like some redeeming qualities where I feel like, yeah, this team is really going to turn it around and become dominant again. It's just. Yeah, it doesn't look like their macro is pretty weak right now. And if I look at the personality types, I think maybe Broken Blade could fix it. But then again, you need metas that really facilitate that. So I'm really curious to see how that develops, like when they remove lane swaps. If G2 could make a comeback, I think it's like the only way that they could. But other than that, I don't see much inspiring gameplay coming out of them.
Yeah, two things on that. One, another reason why, as long as he's still good, you just gamble and send the whole org on getting Caps is because if people don't know, he actually is just Anakin Skywalker of European League of Legends, guys. The worst he has ever placed in an entire split is 4th. Ever. Aside from that, it was just the finals 1 billion times, and he lost once in the finals from like a miracle performance from Rogue, who, by the way, I've heard would have actually just broken up if they hadn't won that final. Like, that wasn't even one they were supposed to win. So it's obviously the ultimate play. You just send it on. If you get, it's the same as if you could get Trophy or something like that. Of course you do it. You just break the bank. Like, you'd be a fool not to. And then on this angle, technically we did get lost to the source of it. It was supposed to be about G2 not being a generational dynasty anymore. The reason I agree is, even though people think this is harsh, I do think that, like, Broken Blade is one of the contenders for best top laner. Hansam at times has been the best ADC. The difference is, though, they aren't generational talents for me in the same way as like Prime Perks, Prime Caps, Prime Yankos, Prime Mickey X. That was what you had in the super team that was amazing, is it was a super team and it was awesome. And you could even have seen, they tried to all the years out, you could have taken like one piece out here and there and you'd still have like 3 generational players, 2 generational, and the problem is they've gone down, and it's only Caps now. And so here's the lens I want to give people to G2, is imagine Caps does go, like, you can have your choice of any mid laner. You can have Humanoid, you can have Joe. Take any mid laner. That's now not the best team in the LEC. I don't care what the rest of the lineup is like. Caps is what even gives you the chance to still be the number 1 team. So if you take him out, by the way, that's a terrible side. If Caps listens to this argument, it's going to go, yeah, but wait a minute. So I'm the only one making this actual all-time great team. Yeah, that's a bad sign, mate. That's when you hit the bricks, because I can tell you a very quick example if people just know CS. In CS, we just had this scenario like this happen where the player Nico is like probably the 4th best player in the world last year. year, and he left G2, who was like one of the best teams. They were in a position to win everything, and all these fans were like, "Why would you ever leave, though?" And it's like, because he's one of the reasons they're in that position to win. Like, by the way, now he's left, that seems like questionable to even win a tournament again with this lineup. So when players realise, wait, I'm doing a lot of the heavy lifting of making us really great, people get bored of that eventually. You want to play with the other fucking super sick players, like I say, who are torturing you in all the scrims and winning all the stages. You want to just go, let's actually have 3 players that are unbelievable and could do something at Worlds. Because there's another thing, by the way. If you're Caps, you can't... That's why I thought the Yike move was a gamble back in the day. You can't actually tell me, like, look, give Yike another year and then he could be really good at Worlds. Like, bro, I want to be good at Worlds every year. Like, I almost won that shit a couple of times. Like, I need to be back there now. So I need the jungler, like, that's why I can see why they want El Yoya. I want the jungler that now can be the best and can go against the Asian guys. So, yeah, G2's got, put it this way, that G2 GM, once upon a time, that was the easiest gig in the game. I mean, not least because they were poaching like a motherfucker, I'm just going to say that. But they were the best at it. They were the best at poaching. But I tell you what, that's about to become the hot seat after this year, based on what you're saying. If the contract runs out, yeah, that makes or breaks your career, what you do there.
And it's not just that one move. It's like, if you're a player, you want to join the good roster. So for example, I think Caps would never go to LPL. I think they just join the best roster, right? But if you're a player making a decision on joining a roster, if your top laner and AD carry are your best players, or you can choose between like a good jungle support, like 9 out of 10 players are going to choose a jungle support. So I feel like Caps leaving doesn't just leave the whole of Caps leaving, it also leaves the whole where it's going to be much more difficult to attract like the top talent. If a player can choose between, for example, Koi and G2, I think a lot of players would actually choose Koi.
Right.
And that's why the Dynasty would actually fall.
Okay, Peter, what is your bad point?
Okay, so my bad point, we've talked a lot about the ecosystem, but obviously LEC resumes this weekend with best of 3s. So, I don't think there's too much to be said about Fnatic versus Heretics. We talked about Vitality versus K-Corp last week. So let's talk about GX versus G2. My thought for this, my bad point is, GX literally got the worst draw that they could possibly get. And it's the worst draw that they could possibly get because I've been a coach before. And if I am a coach and I'm in Gilotto's situation, there is no way that I'm going and making a public statement about how bad G2 is unless I have a reason to do that, right? Because if I do that, it is going to be a distraction. It's going to cause a lot of fans to message me. We're in Europe, so they won't message death threats, but they'll message I hope you lose your job and you end up on the street, and we're more civilized. We're more we don't want you dead. We just want you to be on the street.
Be a bum and homeless and have no job. Yeah,
exactly, or your mother or your family. Yeah, in NA they just go straight to the bullets. But you're going to get a ton of stuff like this, right? You're going to. Yeah, which is going to be a distraction. It's going to cause a lot more intense focus on your players at the point where you have a new roster and you don't need that distraction at that point in the roster process. Maybe in summer, fine, but not at this point in the year, right? Because it's going to follow you around for the rest of the year. So the question is, Gilotto is not stupid, right? So why is Gilotto making a statement like this? Okay, and the reason, this is my read, but you'd have to ask him yourself. But my read is, the reason you would make a comment like this is because you need to go and show your players that in private, you may be saying, I think you can beat G2, but players will always think, oh, you're just saying that, or it's it's like when your mum says, oh, you're really
handsome or whatever.
Yeah, exactly,
okay.
Right? But then by going out and saying it publicly and putting yourself in the firing line, it shows that you're really, really serious, right? So this is my read, right? When obviously people clown on him for it, but my read is you would go and make an interview like that if you are trying to make a point to people in your team, right? Now, what happened is that they played G2 2 days later or a week later, and they got completely murdered, right? And the players who I thought would really, really struggle against G2 struggled against G2, which is Noah and Jun, who at this point look like they have some kind of a mental block because of all the stuff that happened last year in Fnatic. Every single time they played G2 over the course of the year, it's like they were getting ground down mentally, right? Until in the summer, they were they could be 5k gold ahead every game and still just be unable to do the basics. And to me, this is my bad point. My bad point is that if it's reached the point where week 2 in winter, your coach has to go and go aggressively in public like that for you, that is not a good thing, right? And if it's a rookie coach or if it's like somebody who always shouts their mouth off, that's one thing. But if somebody like Gilotto is coming out and saying that leads me to believe that there's something really, really like.
You think he's trying to light a fire under them, basically?
Well, no, I think he's trying to go and show I'm not talking bullshit to you.
Oh, okay.
Like it's like I'm like, I'm saying something behind the scenes. Oh, it's clear you don't believe me because you think, oh, it's just a coach saying that, right? Like, of course he's going to say that,
he's
right?
putting his rep on the line, right?
So I'm going to go publicly and face all this ridicule to prove it to you. And then you would expect, okay, normally from a certain type of player, the type of player that would value this kind of outside, value this kind of thing being stood up for publicly, it's gonna light a fire under their ass, and then they're gonna go and play that G2 team, and they're gonna play how they play in scrims, or they're gonna go and stomp them into the ground. But that's not what happened at all. What happened is they played G2, and those guys look dreadful, right? So it's in a sense, it's either had the opposite effect, or it was already so bad anyway that like it didn't move the needle, right?
Okay.
And that really, really scares me for this series, because from what I've heard, from everything I've heard, Giants have been a really good team in scrims, but the fact that they're playing G2 is a disaster, basically from what I've seen so far, and it's going to impact them in lower bracket, and maybe they lose 2-0 to G2. They lose, well, then they're going to play Heretics in lower bracket. So they should hopefully be able to beat Heretics, but imagine only beating Heretics 2-1 or like losing to Heretics, right? That can like damage you for the entire year. So if I was a Giants fan, I would have wanted literally anyone else, and that includes Fnatic. Yeah.
So I have a similar read on you, but I don't think that Gilotto would do that to back up a privately made statement. I think it's even worse. I think he feels the room and understands that the players are scared to death of G2 and feels like something big needs to happen for them to really come around. So I think that's the moment where you would make such a tweet and put yourself in the line of fire. Like try to give the player some kind of confidence on a level that is completely unreal. Now, I think that's like 99% of it. The other 1% is like he could just be like incredibly intelligent and understand that if he creates some kind of big rivalry with G2, he's doing his org and himself a massive favor.
Right.
But I think it's very unlikely. But because I think we need way more of that in the LEC. So he could have maybe just thrown it out there to just completely hype up the match. But I think the players behind the scenes are probably like, okay, we're gonna face G2 guys. Should we just like lose the draft on purpose to not show like important picks for like other games? Like I think these kind of conversations happen backstage, and Peter, you've probably heard those as well. Like in the day.
Holy moly!
Yeah, like let's just lose this game and then not show anything. So I think these kind of statements are likely made between the players when he's in the room and he's understood like he needs to do something to try to steer that ship around. But yeah. So that's my read, and I do think GX. If you're GX, if Fnatic's maybe even a worse pick in this meta. But yeah, if you play against G2, I feel like you're pretty much have the same strengths and weaknesses, but you're just weaker almost everywhere. So slightly weaker.
So I'm grinning so much because the number of times I've heard a conversation like, "Oh, just don't show this against this team," or like, just draft standard, or let's flip something which we would never flip in like a 2080 flip at level 1 or something. Like, holy moly, those conversations! I'm so glad I don't have to have those conversations anymore. My God. And obviously, as a coach, you have to like not tilt your players on the day of a game or like the night before a game, whilst thinking, my God, yeah.
The other thing is as well, like I'll use like a sports analogy. There's like, think about how many, by the way, there are 1 million basketball videos where it's like trash talk, legendary trash talk of Michael Jordan or Larry Bird or something like that. And the story always goes that like the new good player in the NBA is playing this guy. They're having a good game and they think, oh, fuck, right, it's my chance to talk some shit. And then what they don't realize is people like Michael Jordan are like Caps. They've just been on top every single year. They're the best player. So what happens is it's not that you phone it in. It's just that there are certain games where you go sort of like okay, it's not the end of the world if I just have an all right game here, or you know what, we're winning as our record anyway. We can get the playoff spot. In fact, we don't even, oftentimes when you're champion like that, you don't even need the number one seed. We can just be a good team still. Well, the difference is when someone shit talks you like this, that becomes a reason to take revenge on them in that specific game. And as you say, I don't think it's a coincidence they didn't just lose. They got completely destroyed in that game, Peter. Like, if anything, that looks like the wake-up call for G2, and then actually GX just never looked as good after that. Like, it's actually kind of a bomber on both sides. I do actually see what Kyoto was potentially trying to do. And if he had, by the way, done that, because remember, there was also the hype that GX was winning a lot of scrims too, and that G2 was looking dodgy in the first few weeks. If that had somehow landed, like he basically called his shot, like, we're going to be, like, G2's not going to be that good, and then they'd have beaten them in the BO1. By the way, even though it's only a BO1, that would have done so much psychologically for his team, bro. Then they'd be on the narrative of YoungBuck. Like, this is the end of their fucking dynasty. It's our time now. Like, we're going to be there with Fnatic in the finals. Fuck the G2 angle. Yeah, true. The problem is, I agree with your latter point, though. The reason why it's a nightmare matchup as well is because you look at some of the strengths that you have on this team on GX. Like, the biggest strength is Jackie's, right? He's one of the players where I could see so many mid laners you can play against. You have a chance to maybe even diff them or have champions where he's going to be much better. You picked basically like the historical unbeatable mid laner that he has to go against. So that absorbs some of that factor. By the way, we were just talking about Broken Blade. The Lock guy, can he get a break? He has to go against Broken Blade with the massive champion Ocean behind him as well. Oh, and then also, now it's Fearless Draft, and we're playing against Dylan Falco, who's just been waiting like a demon the whole time. Like, yes, soon I will reveal myself to the Jedi. He's just been waiting to unleash all this shit from Fearless Draft that he's got secret in his back pocket that you haven't seen in a scrim and you haven't played against yet. And then lastly, obviously, the experience gap is ridiculous. I know there's some newer players on G2, but you go and look, like, unironically, guys, at this point in time, technically, Noah is a closer to your veterans on GX. Like, bro, that's not the same caliber of having, like, the people who, like, that the G2 players can do that fucking thing that I think is gangster in sports, where you just wear all the rings at once, and it's like some Thanos shit, like, every finger's got a ring on. They haven't got one ring! They've got nothing! They just be like, I came second one time, it was cool. Like, I guess Closer's got that fucking LCS ring, but listen, Closer, you're in the LEC now, mate. That's some Mickey Mouse shit. You know what I mean? That's not... Listen... the reason why Closer, I can't say you've got a really legit ring is because we don't really consider Abadaga one of the best middlers of all time, mate, and he has a ring too, so, you know, that's all I'm going to say on that one. Right, okay. The last point of the show, I actually like to do it this time. It's a very self-indulgent point, actually. It's quite a ridiculous point, but I'll do it anyway, and it's obviously mad, almost sycophantic to do this point, but I'll do it anyway. Neither of you were coaching in the LEC. There's some good coaches in the LEC. I don't think it's our best crop ever. But I just look at the league and I think to myself, mate, Peter Dun the joke would be he'd ruin himself in an interview. He'd be all over that Vitality roster, mate. He'd probably even find a way he did on past episodes to fucking mind fuck himself that Team Heretics has got all the potential. They can all learn to be super good. I don't give a fuck. Like, to me, they're just lucky SK and Rogue exist. So I also think of YoungBuck. I think of some of the big name rosters and some of the ones that he could have worked with again. Both of you were like actual fan favourites. You have the narratives. You've had your success in the career. You've gone to Worlds. Watch it. Neither of you are coaching anymore. You're not even in the league. There's my bad point. What do you think?
I'm happy where I'm at in my life.
Okay.
Like, I feel like, okay, no. So let me put it this way. I think I can coach better than most LEC coaches at this point. But given that, you know, after the whole Excel debacle, like, I moved back to the Netherlands, got a home here. It's like such a big investment at the age of 32 with like 2 kids to go live full time in Berlin that like a full time head coaching job is not it for me. Like, I still think I could, you know, provide a lot to a team in a different role, like a part time or like a bit more remote role. But yeah, I think like even like players like coaches like Grabs will get a second chance. Like, these are the kind of formats and the kind of rosters that like more seasoned coaches would work really well with, and especially with like Fearless, like coaches like Dylan are just going to eat it up because they are very good at drafting.
I fully agree. I think that the big benefit of experienced coaches is definitely on the more veteran rosters, which I think is, you know, YoungBuck's speciality. It's Grabs' speciality. It's Dylan's speciality. I mean, for me, like, obviously, if I was 10 years younger, I would love to coach a Vitality roster, but I'm certain Mac is going to do a great job.
Okay.
And like the you know, the question is esports the type of place that will allow you to develop talent? So for me, you know, obviously the rosters that I would like, if you say which roster would you want to coach in LEC, like, it would be a roster like Vitality or KCOR. And frankly, you know, like, they have really good development coaches on those rosters anyway. And the other, I've been on 2 orgs in a row that talked like they wanted to develop but didn't actually want to develop, and that's kind of, yeah. It's better to do shows and talk about and enjoy the rookie development rather than go back and coaching. I think burned maybe one time too many, I think. So yeah. For people that don't know, I'm working on my football coaching badges now in the Netherlands. So maybe do the League of Legends version of talent development. Work in the under 18s. In that area, or under 20s, under 21, sorry. So yeah.
By the way, I don't know how old everyone's references in football are, but the obvious joke I'll end on is, I just hope, YoungBuck, if you know the reference, that he ends up doing the Steve McLaren, which is like a famous coach from the UK. And when he famously came to the Netherlands, he did that thing where, some people, like their brain just naturally adapts to whoever they're talking to. And he did an interview immediately where he was talking in a mad Dutch accent, bro. Even though there's no way he speaks Dutch. And everyone laughed. It's one of the most, if you go online, it'll have like 1 million views. I hope that's like Peter Dun in like 3 years, he's just like coming in with ridiculous Dutch. I would love that so much.
Oh no, why would you?
That would be funny as fuck, mate. I would love it.
I mean,
I think it still beats Louis van Gaal's English interviews.
Oh, true.
Holy moly,
they're legendary.
They were pretty wild too. Yeah, they do. It did work the other way around too. That's true.
Yeah. Yeah, English media to a Dutch coach, like, oh my god.
Oh yeah, there's the other thing as well, by the way.
I wanted to tell them to.
No, I'll tell you, by the way, that's how you actually know that Arnie Slot guy. Mate, he must just be doing meditation every day. I can't believe he hasn't cracked, because the English media, they're trying to just get you shit stir on everything. Even if you just say something like, you're better than the last coach, you'd be toast. So the fact that he's held so long and he hasn't yet slipped once, mate, he's made out of gold, that guy.
Yeah.
He is.
Respect.